Dr. Lena asks, what is resilience? And to me, resilience is soul food. When Granny passed, there was no one left to sprinkle love into our Sunday dinners. We sat around living room tables, stuffing our faces with memories of how she was able to slide all that seasoning to the mac and cheese and those collard greens. We wondered, who gonna bring the cornbread now? Wondered, whose turn was it to take shots at dark walls like darts and try to make grandma's sweet potato pie again? The fried chicken, it lost its crunch in the end. And we kept finding eggshells in our version of your classic potato salad. It left our palates simmering on the question of what happened to the soul food. Because we can't make it the way Granny used to. You told me, baby, now make sure you follow that recipe. So now I cook with cookbooks of our past conversations. Because you told me that love and pain are sometimes too hard to write down. I didn't realize till now that you use your life experiences as your cooking instruments. When you taught me how to make mac and cheese, you said, now first, baby, get you a deep baking dish. A dish that could withstand high temperatures and come out that fire dancing. And Drew, I know you, so don't mess with the plastic. And when I think of you, you're nothing mere of a classic. A woman with a wide capacity of wisdom and understanding. And yeah, you've been burned a couple times, but you never wore those scars on your sleeves for the masses to see. You told me the next ingredient you need, elbow macaroni. So I ran and bought a couple of boxes. But the pasta remind me of times when Grandpops used your face as his boxing bag. It was sad how a pair of fists could constantly shatter the rain house of beauty God placed inside. When God created you, you had rain gutters clogged from macaroni-shaped tears that dried on their own behind closed doors. When the sun went down, it appears. And just like mac and cheese, you said, well, babe, don't worry about your granddaddy. You know, we as people all got our layers. So don't forget the butter. See, you made it cool to be Southern. And us Southern folks know that butter is like God's miracle elixir to keep everything flowing together. When I started dating, you told me, don't you get seduced by the Northern girl love potion called olive oil. And I get you a Southern belle who know butter is better. A girl gonna cook and get something to hold on to during the winter. And wintertime was known for Grandma's snow cream, right for those good old Sunday dinners. You had me comfortable with sweet tooths like warm soup. On life's cold days, prefer Big Mama over that Campbell soup to soothe you. Often wanted Granny. Now, how were you a deaconess in the church? And you know voodoo. I mean, how you had us entranced by how you danced on this kitchen floor to a jazz band of ingredients and his family musicians. You were the heartbeat, the drummer that kept everything consistent. But when you went missing, this family band, we fell apart. We couldn't figure out what song we were playing. And we always wanted to be one band with one sound, but all I hear now is, baby, go back to the recipe. And it's funny, the last ingredient you list is the cheese, because it starts in the heart, and you were the block that bleeds over everything. You brought consistency. You taught the other ingredients how to love, how to pray, how to breathe, how to stand. After life gives you a blow to the face and just find your way to keep on dancing, I will always remember your last answer. Now, baby, you're gonna know your work is done when you get to see that melted golden cheese. So I become a master at cooking soul food, as y'all can see. I'm constantly cooking all of Granny's favorite recipes, but it's not about the food anymore. See, I cook and I pray and I breathe for one last second with all your famous memories. Ashe.
Men, better yet, black men. The darkness we sometimes feel won't just flee. The tears we cry, many times we never let them see. The world told me, us, to always be strong. But in this world, we often question, do we really still belong? We definitely struggle daily. Please let them see. Depression, alcoholism, and anxiety. These tears that we cry are not always just our own. It's a collective we. Sorrow, sadness, and yes, there's that, police brutality. Healing is something. Speaking up is not a sin. This too shall pass. We can weather these storms, dear Black men. Welcome to the Power of Our Stories, brought to you by the Hope Center, where healing takes center stage. Now, give a warm digital welcome in the chat to our host for today, the Executive Director of the Hope Center, Dr. Lena Green.
Good evening, and happy Black History Month. I am Dr. Lena Green, the Executive Director of the Hope Center Harlem, and it is my good honor to welcome you tonight to the Power of Our Stories, Men and Mental Health. We are coming to you live tonight from FCBC, so if you have tuned in to watch TNT, guess what? You are in the right place. So welcome, welcome, and welcome. We would like to know where you are tuning in from tonight, so go ahead, take a minute, drop it in the chat. I may shout you out, but let us know where you're checking in from. And while you're doing that, give us a few minutes and check out our announcements.
Hey family, welcome to the Power of Our Stories, brought to you by the Hope Center, where healing takes center stage. I'm Julius J.U. Jones, and yes, these are your Hope Center Harlem announcements. Are you a new or expecting mom looking for a free support group? Well, the Hope Center is proud to present the Motherhood Journey, a 8-week support group dedicated to building community while providing useful information about the motherhood journey. Sessions will be held virtually and in person. To learn more and sign up, visit hopecenterharlem.org. Calling all girls ages 13 through 18. The Hope Center's PhotoStart Youth Photography Program is looking for you. Do you have an interest in photography and honoring your feelings through the lens? Join us for a 8-week program held on Mondays from 4 to 6 p.m. starting March 20th. Visit tinyurl.com/photostart@hope to apply. Space is limited, and the deadline to apply is Friday, March 10th. Thrive, Hope Center's group-based youth resilience program that is dedicated to youth ages 13 through 18, is having its next monthly check-in on Wednesday, March 15th at 4 to 6 p.m. Space is limited and registration is required. Visit hopecenterharlem.org/events to learn more and RSVP. Join the Hope Center for a 6-week self-care journey beginning Wednesday, March 15th, 2023. This series will teach you all about the importance of self-care while guiding you through exercises that honor your physical, spiritual, financial, mental, and social self-care. To learn more, visit www.hopecenterharlem.org. Registration is required. Healing is a lifestyle, and journaling can aid you in your healing. Join the Hope Center for Writing Your Truth, a 6-week series where we will explore how writing can benefit your mental wellness by reducing stress and so much more. No previous writing experience is required, and sessions start Thursday, March 16th. Visit hopecenterharlem.org for more details. During the month of hope, join us for a discussion on how to gain optimal wellness through the Hope Center's new book club, where we will be reviewing and discussing First Edition, Then Subtraction by Maganwi Eric Kawasi. Hosted on Zoom from 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, the book club will meet on Mondays starting April 3rd, 2023. Check out hopecenterharlem.org for more details. Think It, Say It, Do It, a Hope Center series in partnership with author J.R. McDonald. This series is here to remind us to laugh, dance, and use transformational words to catapult us to new dimensions. Are you ready for the Think It, Say It, Do It movement? Change your words and change your life by tapping in every second and third Monday on Instagram and YouTube. Join the Hope Center for Worthy, a interview-styled podcast dedicated to helping each of us see that we are not alone through stories of triumph. Hosted by me, J.U. Jones, Worthy is a 8 to 15-minute motivational show that will air every fourth Monday starting February 27, 2023. Exclaim that you too are worthy by either tuning in wherever you get your podcast, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music, or by visiting podcast.hopecenterharlem.org. The Hope Center, where healing takes center stage. Well, that's it for now, Hope Center family. Remember to follow and stay in the know with all things Hope Center Harlem on social media. Whether you tap in via Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube, the key is to continue to heal on purpose and evolve. The Hope Center's crisis text line is still free, 24/7 and confidential. If you ever need someone to talk to about life's multitude of moments, text WORTHY to 741-741. That's WORTHY to 741-741. Also, support Hope Center Harlem programming and mission through 2 easy ways to give. Whether you text to give or give via the Hope Center's website, all donations support the work of the Hope Center and are tax deductible. I'm Julius J.U. Jones, and these were your Hope Center Harlem announcements. Now back to you, Dr. Green.
All right. So you all are tuning in from near and far. Of course, the tri-state area is in the house. So we've got Harlem, Brooklyn, the Bronx, upstate New York, Pennsylvania, Alabama, and Texas, just to name a few. So thank you for joining us. Let's get to it. Research from around the world tells us that men everywhere are reluctant about their mental health despite experiencing high levels of stress. These stressors can include anything from relationship troubles to financial challenges to physical health. And these struggles can negatively impact their mental health challenges. We want to change the narrative tonight. So we are bringing you some very special guests that are right here with us in the building. And we are delighted that they have taken the time to join us to embark on a conversation about men and mental health. Our featured guests for tonight include Rawle Andrews, Dr. Sydney Hankerson, and Pastor Mike. Rawle Andrews is the executive director of the American Psychiatric Association Foundation. He's an adjunct professor at the School of Law at Howard University, and also adjunct professor in advanced civil litigation and federal trial practice at Georgetown University. Dr. Sydney Hankerson serves as the associate professor and vice chair for community engagement in the Department of Psychiatry at Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. He also serves as the Director of Mental Health Equity Research at the Institute for Health Equity in the Department of Population Health and Science and Policy. And now you all know Pastor Mike, affectionately known here at FCBC. He is the senior pastor of First Corinthian Baptist Church. He opened the Hope Center Harlem in December of 2012, and after founding the Community Development Corporation, we are excited that he is here to join us tonight. Before I turn it over to our guests, I want to share just a few statistics with you all so that you are aware of what's really happening around men and mental health. Each year, over 6 million men suffer from depression. Approximately 1 in 5 men, that's 1 in 5, will develop a dependency on alcohol throughout their lifespan. If you identify as a gay male or a military veteran, the rate of substance and alcohol abuse is even higher. And many of you have heard us talk about suicide here. It's the 7th leading cause of death for men, which has been on the rise since 2000. After that, you all should be ready to welcome our panelists tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Mike, Dr. Hankerson, and Rawle Andrews.
Evening, FCBC family and beyond. What an amazing opportunity to share with you on tonight. So grateful for Dr. Lena Green and the Hope Center and my amazing colleagues tonight, Dr. Sidney Hankerson and Brother Raw Andrews. We are going to have an amazing conversation tonight, and I'm looking forward to it. If you just heard Dr. Green, she shared some alarming statistics. 6 million Black men suffering with depression, 1 in 5. And you think about the rates of suicide rising since 2000. These statistics are alarming. The one thing about the pandemic that could be somewhat reassuring is that it was during the pandemic years, and we're still in the pandemic, we're not over, but in the early years, 2020, 2021, mental health issues were front and center because it was believed that over 70% of Americans suffered from some form of depression or mental health crisis during the pandemic, and that brought more attention to issues around mental health, mental wellness, and the like. And so I want to ask Dr. Hankerson, when you hear the statistics around men, in particular Black men, and mental health, what jumps out to you when you think about that?
Thank you, Pastor Mike. The statistics are staggering when we think about how many men are admitting that they have depression. But I think those statistics just scratch the surface. We know that men, and Black men in particular, are less likely to admit that they are depressed, are less likely to admit that they have problems with alcohol or drug use. So I think that the statistics are even worse than what is presented. Yeah. And as it relates to suicide, we talked about the rise in suicide since 2000. We know that this mental health crisis is trickled down to our boys. For the first time in our country's history, Black boys between the ages of 5 and 11 have higher rates of suicide than white boys. So our children are killing themselves. And so it's critical that we have this conversation tonight to bring awareness to this issue so that we can really promote healing among brothers and men in our community.
Yeah, Raul, before I come to you, I just want to, for those who are watching, you know, Dr. Hankerson, a few years ago, I served on an advisory task force, congressional advisory task force, around suicide among Black boys and girls, youth. And I don't think people grasp that the highest rates of suicide are Black boys right now between 5 and 11. When I first heard that some years ago, it shocked me. And in my mind, I started thinking about myself, or we could think about ourselves at 5 to 11. The idea that suicide would be an option at 5, 6, 7 is alarming at best. But we're in a crisis, and we don't talk about the crisis. What do you think, Ron, when you hear those statistics?
So we are in a state of emergency, Pastor Mike. And they are startling statistics, but you know, when we think about suicidal ideation, typically what we think is, I'm really in a bad place right now. And it could be 1,000,000 times worse tomorrow if I don't relieve this pain and take my family out of the equation. For an adult, it would be striking, but for a toddler, unthinkable that a 5-year-old would believe that they're in such a tough situation, that the only thing that could relieve any of this situation would be to take their life by suicide. So as a father, as a professional in mental health, I never think we can do enough, and I can tell you that I've been at the APA Foundation for 18 months, and nothing hurts me more when I feel like we're making progress, Pastor Mike, than when somebody dies by suicide. And I feel like no matter what I've done, no matter where I've gone, no matter where my team has gone and what we've done, we're failing because we've lost another promising soul.
I also want to correct my language. Sometimes I have a tendency to fall into the old narratives, and I say this to those who are watching because we have a tendency to say so-and-so committed suicide as though it is a crime, as though something is wrong, rather than death by suicide, right? Because I think we look at it in some ways like, oh my goodness, but when someone takes their life by suicide, it's very telling. I remember many years ago, if you remember the story here in Harlem, there was a young girl, she was 10, a Latina, and she was being bullied and harassed at school, and she lived in public housing. She went to the top of her building, and jumped off the building at 10 years old. It was unthinkable to me that at 10 you could suffer so much crisis, so much pain, that again, that suicide becomes an option. And so I always want to impress those statistics, especially among young people, to those who are watching, because we don't have these conversations enough. We don't think about toddlers. And when you said that, it struck me. When you say toddlers, it puts it in perspective. A 5-year-old is basically a toddler. And to think that a 5-year-old would think, I remember I heard a harrowing story when I was on a task force of a mother who came home to find her 5-year-old boy had hung himself in the closet at 5 years old. And so in my mind, these are the things we have to always address, talk about, and for black men in particular, begin to address in a way that we no longer have to suffer in silence, right? There's so many organizations now that mental health conversations are in vogue in some quarters, that you see these different ads on social media, even campaigns on media, print media as well, where it says, I see you, or check on your strong friend, right? Because oftentimes those of us who are the source of support for so many other people don't always tap into our own well-being, right? So what do you think? How can we as a culture, but more than that, as a community, how can we prioritize mental health education? Ron?
So, Pastor Mike, my question to you as a faith leader,
Yeah.
who will take care of the shepherd while the shepherd takes care of the flock? And one of the things that I think we've fallen into a trap, that we can John Henry or Jane Henry our way out of these situations. And so, one of the things that has been a enlightenment for me, few people will ever mislead you to say they're depressed if they're not really depressed. If somebody tells you they're not feeling well, they're not. Most people are going to say, I'm all right. I'm fine. It's okay.
I'm good.
And we just let them go. Right, I'm good.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things we've got to do is have courageous conversations like you're leading tonight, so that you have a doctor or faith leader and a retired lawyer sitting here, regular guys, so that we can dehumanize and desensitize the boogeyman that I'm too blessed to be stressed.
Yeah.
Or that I got to man up. So we got to have these conversations inside and outside, wherever we're comfortable convening.
Yeah.
But we also got to do it in places where, when you see tragedies like Memphis, and every jurisdiction has a Memphis, right?
Yeah.
You go to work with that on your mind,
Yeah.
right? And we've been taught to hate each other.
Yeah.
And we've been taught to hate ourselves. How do we start learning or unlearning hate, which has never solved a problem, and learn love?
Yeah, yeah. One of the things we don't often talk about, and that I've had numerous conversations with in the past, even with Dr. Hankerson, is this, you introduced this notion of self-loathing, right? That's one piece. But what is big in our communities, especially among men, black men, is the normalization of trauma, right? So Dr. Hankerson, what should men know when it comes to mental health issues or those who are battling trauma in silence?
Yeah, so you have really brought to light the normalization of trauma and how we accept the Memphis as just normal, how we accept the shooting on the street as normal, how we accept the 10-year-old girl jumping to her death as normal, and we just push through it. I think what's critical to know is that we've talked a lot about suicide tonight. What makes depression so lethal, why depression is the #1 cause of disability in the world, is that thoughts of suicide, making a suicide attempt, or having thoughts of wanting to go to sleep and not wake up are actually one of the 9 symptoms of depression. And as men, we don't know that. We don't know that when sometimes we just work and work and work, that could be a sign of depression for us. We don't know that when we are drinking 6-pack of beer for what we say is trying to go to sleep could be a sign of depression for us. We don't know that when we get violent towards our loved ones, that could be a sign of depression for us. So I think it's important to know that as men, symptoms of depression or anxiety or stress look different in us, especially as black men, than it does among other groups. And so what we have to do is to have these type of courageous conversations where we share our experiences, where we say, it is, you can be a man, and it's okay to cry, because we're ingrained from the time we're in sports to say real men don't cry, and real boys don't cry. So we need to become familiar with how mental health challenges can look like and can manifest as black men, and then create spaces where we can talk about it and get the support that we need.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because, these courageous conversations, as Rawls said, become more necessary, connected to what you just said, Dr. Hankerson, which is we don't always know how to spot the signs of deep depression. We don't always recognize the subtle shift in habits. So whereas, for example, you have a drink, and then you don't realize that all of a sudden at night you're having 3 and 4 drinks. It's just I'm drinking, but you don't see it as a problem. And then some of the other behaviors, as you suggested, wanting to sleep more, stay at home more, becoming violent or deflecting, or working as a tool of distraction so you don't have to deal with the issues that you're facing, right? And it manifests itself so much. I've seen it manifest itself in this way, this kind of false bravado. And when you always feel you have to show up and be the best at everything, or show up in a way to put yourself at the forefront. Some people say, well, that's narcissistic, or that person has a big ego. No, it's not always that. It's all, in some ways, that false bravado is a coping mechanism for deep pain, unreconciled pain, right? So there are a lot of folk who I hear, Rawls say things like, well, and we hear this a lot, well, I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. And I've talked to people in my work who struggle with ideas of happiness and joy. In fact, this past Sunday, I talked about how there was a person who came to me and said they were having a hard time being happy. They don't want to be happy. And here's what I did. I said, well, what are the things you like to do that you think can bring you happiness? And they had no answer. So Ron, what do you say to someone who is not necessarily in pursuit of happiness, but always speaks about being miserable or unhappy, and may not see what that is a signal of?
Well, I think the first thing we want to do, Pastor Mike, is hear them and acknowledge that their situation is real. And then when I look at the pillars of contentment, not necessarily happiness, what is your sense of purpose? And maybe it is, as you tried to do, help me find what your sense of purpose is, and how do we get closer to the sun around that sense of purpose. And then look at, you're not feeling well, you're not feeling just in sorts, but close your eyes and try to center yourself. What is the happiest place to you on earth? And what made that place or makes that place the happiest place to you on earth? And how do we stay for an hour, for a day, for a week? And personally, I live my life week to week, even though longevity has its place. But I like to win the week. And what I do is go back, and I obviously learn more when I don't win the week. But I'm honest about the fact, if I take a L, what happened on Monday or Tuesday that I took an L? A loss for those of you in some of those states that don't know what an L is. But then the last pillar really is functioning well, right? And the good thing about depression and anxiety, these are treatable conditions. So if it's just an hour or a couple of days, you're feeling out of sorts, maybe there's nothing to do, and you don't have to self-medicate. You don't have to self-diagnose. But if you're into the weeks and months or years of not feeling it, there are treatments available. There are therapies available. There's discussion available, and I think we just need to be courageous enough. We can man up around going to talk to somebody about that situation.
Yeah, no, that's important what you said, because I think that one of the barriers that has to be broken is this notion that we cannot communicate what we view as a struggle, right? We have a tendency, I have people close to me who have a tendency to just hold everything in. And I never forget, years ago when and some may know, I have serious health issues, right? And, part of the way I coped with my health issues, because I have a rare disease. I was born with no antibodies. So sickness was big for me as a child coming up. And what I did was I tried to overcompensate what I thought was a deficiency by working myself almost to death, which wasn't healthy. And my doctor, one day I was in his office, he took a pencil and he started bending. He said, "This is you, bending. And eventually, pop. He said, "There's but so much you can handle before you break." And I think we sometimes as men, I felt we can hold it, we can handle it. Somehow we feel something is off. And then before you know it, like that pencil, we snap and we break. What adds to it is some of the work you do, Dr. Hankerson, is that church has not always been a friendly place dealing with mental health issues. People love at times to quote that scripture, 2 Timothy 1:7. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind. Now, that's a beautiful scripture. The problem is that scripture can actually be used to attack someone who claims to have some issues around mental health, because that's not of God. Right? That's not of God. God didn't give you. God gave you a sound mind, right? And power to deal with that. What does, when you hear that phrase, a sound mind, what does that mean? How does someone get to a place where they feel like they can be in control of their thoughts when they feel like they are losing it? Because you could say God has not given us a spirit of fear, power, love, sound mind, but you feel like you're absolutely losing it. And on top of that, you don't feel as though you have support from the faith community. What do you say to that person?
Wow, Pastor Mike, that could be a talk in and of itself.
Right.
The role of the church and black men in talking about mental health. Ooh. And how the church has been a bridge and a barrier.
Yeah.
And acknowledging that. So I think, Raw, I love what you said in terms of the pillars of contentment.
Beautiful.
And really focusing on trying to identify someone's purpose. And I think what we want to talk about tonight is hopefully begin to shift the conversation from illness to wellness.
Yes.
And there's also pillars of wellness. And so part of that is kind of your thoughts, kind of your cognitive ability to think and carry out activities. But another pillar of wellness is your social connectedness. So who are you connected to, and who is in your network that you can rely on and lean on? Another part of that pillar is really your financial situation and your financial health. And we know for black men in particular, because of the mass incarceration that has impacted so many brothers, we have limited opportunities economically. So our financial situation can be impacted. And so in terms of controlling our thoughts, I think it needs to look holistically at all aspects and all pillars of contentment and wellness to be able to get a complete picture of how to work through and navigate through our situation.
Yeah. I always think about that scripture because it makes the assumption that if God is on your side, you shouldn't have these struggles, right? So what do you say, Raw? Brother comes to you and says he's conflicted because he's a believer, he trusts in God, and he feels almost ashamed to be battling with mental health issues.
And I'll speak from the secular perspective, Pastor Mike, but I will also say that faith without work.
Dead.
and so
hold on, I'm the preacher, man.
There you go. Let's work together And I appreciate you sharing
Yeah.
that you are conflicted.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, if God has provided tools
That's right.
and divinely inspired a Dr. Hankerson to help, shame on us for saying we're going to bury our talents and not go to Dr. Hankerson
That's right.
and see what we could do. But one of the things I want to announce here, and I hope you, Pastor Mike and Dr. Hankerson, will join us. We are going to launch, and we say this live from the sanctuary of FCBC, what we're calling the First Step campaign. The First Step campaign is designed to mainstream mental wellness. We're not talking about the S word anymore in the First Step campaign. There are 3 components. One, that baseline mental illnesses are treatable. We talked a lot about depression tonight. Depression can be treated. Anxiety can be treated. PTSDs can be treated. 2, in that second phase, and we're talking about a multi-million-dollar multimedia campaign that's going to last 5 to 7 years. I'm pulling the first $2 million out of our endowment to launch this campaign, and I already have board approval to do it. So we're going to talk about it's treatable. Then in the second component of the First Step campaign, because that's the hardest step, Pastor Mike, we're going to talk about behavior. So all of the discussions about conflict and I don't know what to do and this is demonic, talk to a health provider about it. And guess what? Even though I represent 37,000 psychiatrists across 100 countries, you don't have to go see a psychiatrist. When you go talk to your primary care physician, when you go to the urgent care clinic, when you go to a pediatrician, an OB-GYN, and they talk about your knee or whatever ails you, talk about your wellness as well in that meeting, and let's see how help can be provided. It may very well be you'll get a referral to a psychiatrist, but it may very well be you just don't sleep enough, and you're not eating right, and you don't exercise. You don't just go get some sun and take a walk. That third phase is all about attitude. And when we come back here in 2028, everybody in your church is going to say, on and offline, there is no health without mental health. So we're going to form this movement. We need help to get it done, but we're not going to wait on others to do the work that we're called to do. We're taking $2 million and we're going to work.
Now, why that's important is because what you are suggesting and saying you all are going to do is to contribute to, I always say, demythologizing narratives around mental health and mental wellness and destigmatizing, right? I think any campaign that seeks to address issues around mental health and wellness with black men in particular has to do that work. It first, before you talk about how do we gain access, it has to be, how do we define? Because part of the problem rests with certain definitions of what it means to be a man, right? How we show up and how, and the expectations, not that just are placed upon us, but to be placed upon ourselves. So Dr. Hankerson, if a brother comes to you and he says to you, you know, I'm struggling, but I think I'm okay, right? Because as you said, we want to make talking to Dr. Hankerson, we want to normalize that. But there are those, as you said, there's no health without mental health, but there are those who have not gotten to the point that they feel, right, that they're able to go to a mental health practitioner the way we would go to the emergency room if we broke our toe. So if you had that brother coming to you who felt embarrassed about what he was in crisis about because it rubs up against some definition of manhood, what do you say to him?
Wow. So for that brother that is embarrassed or afraid of coming to get help, you know, from a mental health professional and coming to get help from a psychiatrist, I first hear their story. Because oftentimes, especially for black boys and men, there's been a family member who has had a negative experience with the mental health system. Yeah. And oftentimes, parents will encourage, especially black boys, to not seek care from a psychiatrist because they know the history of over-medication of black boys and men. And so I think the first step is to really understand where they're coming from and try to understand their perspective. And then the next step is really to try to walk with them to understand how they are struggling, to understand how they are not functioning now compared to how they want to, and to help them see the picture of their life of what it could be compared to what it is now. And then lastly, I think people assume that because I am a psychiatrist, the first thing that I do is to write a prescription. That could not be further from the truth. The first thing that I do is do a comprehensive, health assessment. I want to understand how you're sleeping, how you're eating. I want to know what's going on in terms of your relationships. Where do you live? How is work? And so understanding how can we think in terms of different steps, whether it's exercise, whether it's sleep modification, whether it's talk therapy, and maybe if you're really, really in crisis, medications. But how can we work together to get you to the place of healing and wholeness that you want to go to?
Could I just add as a non-clinician, Pastor Mike, that we know there are more pediatricians dealing with the mental health needs of children and adolescents than psychiatrists. But the one thing I think that Dr. Hankerson is saying that all of our listeners need to understand, Dr. Hankerson is a physician. He is a medical doctor who specializes in psychiatry, just like medical doctors specialize in cardiology. They specialize in pediatrics, obstetrics, cardiopulmonary disease, and so forth. But first and foremost, he's a medical doctor.
That's right.
Go see your doctor and let them see what they can do and if you're struggling. And if you really need to go Vanguard, everybody want to be first class until it comes time to the mental health. If I want to go first class, I'm going to a psychiatrist. The same way I'm going to a cardiologist if I got a problem with the ticker.
Absolutely. No, that's a great distinction. People miss that, especially in psychiatry. They don't realize that those who practice psychiatry are medical doctors. There's an MD at the end of the right? And that's important to know because, as you said, that means that in medicine, there's a realization and a reality that health and medicine also encompasses one's mental, psychological, and emotional well-being. We miss that. I mean, part of what we have to do with changing the narrative, and we often hear the example, that we want this to be just as accessible and free of stigma as if you had a laceration that needed stitches and you go to the emergency room. That we have to get to a point where we normalize this conversation, normalize seeking help, right? And so that people don't feel any kind of way about it. I mean, for me, Dr. Hankerson, what we did here is that we created the Hope Center because, one, there were those of us who are pastors on staff who could not handle all the issues that came, and we wanted to have a space where people can get, access to mental health care. And that's not the norm in most places in churches, right? But for me, I understood that personally because it wasn't just about what I dealt with. It was about what I saw people dealing with and the hesitation to talk about it, right? And I think what we miss sometimes, well, a friend of mine said to me one time, the shortest distance between two people is a story, right? Their story. So talk, I want both of you, I want to hear both, and I'll share some things, but make it real for some folk. What are those moments in your own life where you know that you felt you were not well mentally? And as a doctor, and as a psychiatrist, right? What did you do? How did you notice it?
Yeah, no, I remember this clear as day. So the first time that I really knew something was off was when I was in medical school. So I went to medical school in Atlanta, Georgia, and the fourth year of medical school was supposed to be the most chill year. But for me, it was the most difficult. I found myself really struggling in trying to figure out what my next steps were going to be in a relationship. I found myself struggling with some family issues. And slowly but surely, I spent more and more time in bed. And to the point that on the weekend, I would spend 14, 15, sometimes 16 hours a day just in the bed. I would only eat takeout every day. I gained 30 pounds. And there were times that I would be in the hospital, seeing patients, and then I would go into the bathroom and cry. And I didn't know what was going on. I didn't understand it. And I told myself, you about to be a doctor. You about to graduate, brother. You better pull this stuff together.
Right.
But the feeling didn't go away. And so I had to wrestle with, well, am I going to go get help? Am I going to go see a therapist? Am I going to go get help? And even though this was the chosen profession that I went into and that I had, I didn't want to go. And so I struggled. I struggled academically. I struggled in my relationship. My weight continued to go up. And finally, I said, Sydney, something has to give. And so I started to see a therapist at that point in my 4th year of medical school. And I have been seeing this therapist since that time. I still see a therapist in New York City every single week. And so talking to a therapist has been a lifesaver for me. And there have been other periods that I've definitely struggled, but that was one that was most vivid and really promoted and really launched me on this journey of self-care.
Ron, you want to share?
So I was in younger years, what is now known as a cutter. And because of anxiety in my preteen years, I used to bite the skin off the nub of both of my thumbs. And it got to the point where if I couldn't get to the skin, I would then carve with my fingernails. And I did not go to a therapist, and I thought I could conceal it. But when you're from the Gulf Coast, United States of Texas, we don't need gloves like you do uptown, right? So your hands are out there, and all of a sudden the skin is bare. And it was embarrassing to have that revealed at the breakfast table. But I talked to a faith leader, not a doctor, even though I had doctors in the house who were available. And it was that doctor experience as a reverend doctor who talked to me about what I was going through and why was I trying to live my whole life, a year is a day, right? And, I'm just trying to do everything, and you're just trying to get to some place, destination unknown. And that was where we came up with the articulation of just go week by week. It's 52 weeks. And you're not going to be good 52 weeks. But if you could string together 3 or 4 weeks, 45, 46 weeks out of 52, you're going to be all right. And so that's what I started doing. And the other thing is I was encouraged, cut your fingernails, right? Because sometimes as boys, we just don't do enough with the hygiene. And so even to this day, I don't like fingernails. And it all goes back to being about 11, 12 years old. And so even though it looks like because I don't have fingernails, it would hurt, I don't have fingernails, I can go knuckle to knuckle. But it doesn't tempt me to do anything. The other thing real quick, as an adult, the driving while black thing is a major barrier for me. And one of the things that I don't think a lot of times folks who don't come from our community understand, I had a board meeting Monday, and I did a ride share to the office versus drive because I didn't want to have an episode happen and then either I was a hashtag or just have people wondering aloud, what happened to Raw? Why is he not at the board meeting? Now, I'm not like some other folks who might be worried, I wasted Starbucks on my coat, on my tie. I'm thinking about what if I see flashing lights in the back? So I got to eliminate as much of that variable. For 42 years of driving, inside or outside a pandemic, I have never gotten in a car because of the many times that I was stopped for driving while black, and I wasn't cognizant that this could be the day. And what made the pandemic so hard for me, Pastor Mike, is that the way people see me dressed now in my armor of God, I was way dressed down, wearing sweatsuits, no hoodies, but sweatsuits and tennis shoes. And I'm just a big black guy in the rearview mirror. And I've never been able to get past that I should be able to get in the car and go to this board meeting and be worried about my agenda. And do we have everything ready to present to the board? And I'm worried about whether I'm going to survive to even get there. And then when I get there, I got to drive back home.
People don't realize that. I'll give you an example. Well, one, that goes back to the normalization of trauma, the daily manifestations of trauma we deal with as African Americans. I think about something as simple as vacation. There's some places, and you can tell me wrong, there's some places when you think about going to, you start thinking, how many black folk are there? Is racism bad in that place? We don't think, because there's other folk, there's some white folk, and I think about that. They can go wherever they want without that thought. We think about, well, man, will there be hostility in that region? I mean, those are questions we ask. I remember Dr. Green one time went to, tell her business, she went to Iceland. And I remember my question was, are there black people in Iceland? I said, how were they with black folk? And she, oh, man, they were amazing. But a lot of people never have to ask that question. Right? Don't have to think about that. So there are thoughts as a black person in this country you have to think about that other communities don't have to think about. That's traumatizing. It creates anxiety within you, right? And you ask those questions. And so whether it's driving while black or traveling while black, you go on and on. There are things we experience that many people don't have to experience that are in many ways cause a level of, PTSD within us, right? And we miss that. For me, my move into this area, desire to want to be participate in the mental health area, came from years. I was always sickly, always in the hospital. Didn't know I had depression growing up for a large portion of my life. Didn't realize it was that. The wanted to retreat, be by myself, sleep a lot. Didn't really engage people. I mean, I didn't realize that. Was pastoring. Didn't realize I was dealing with anxiety and depression. Never understood that because in my mind, because I was overcompensating for my condition, I didn't realize that. And it was 2007 that I had my first suicidal ideation. I had been a pastor for 11 years. And the first time, and I was ashamed of it. I was ashamed about what happened. And just to give you an example, 2007 was my first suicidal ideation. I had another one in 2009, another 2010. I was battling depression, not talking about it, because the way I was able to cover it, because I had to show up to preach every week. I had to teach every week. I had to counsel people every week. So the idea of dealing with Michael was not on the table. And then in 2012, I almost died from sepsis, and it was a tailspin, because it was so weird how it happened, and I went into a deep depression. So from the first suicidal ideation in 2007, it was 5 years. It took me 5 years to say, you know what? I need to see somebody. I need to talk to somebody. I started therapy, and then it was 2014, I believe. I'm going back to your earlier statement to me, when I tell people, when the comedian Robin Williams died, right? There's a line it was Time Magazine, had a whole issue to him. And someone said something that hit me, and I was weeping. And the writer of it was a friend of Robin Williams who said that, for so many people in this country, Robin Williams had helped them with his, comedic genius get through some of the most difficult times of their life, that people depended on Robin Williams to laugh. He said, the problem was Robin Williams had no Robin Williams to help him with his psychic fractures. And it crushed me. Because what was happening to me at the time is that, I preach, I teach, and constantly people coming up to me, Pastor Mike, you saved me. Pastor Mike, you helped me. And I was crushed every time they said that. I got angry because I said, here I am, God, you're using me to help people, and I am a mess, and I am struggling. And so for going on 11 years now, as you said, been in therapy. Initially, them first few years, it was twice a week. Right, I wasn't playing Monday, Friday. I was like, listen, I need the front end and the back end every week, and then now it's once a week. But don't stop. My therapist literally saved my life, because if you have suicidal ideations over 5 years, one of those times, if you're not careful, you're gonna act it out, right? So I think that's important. So the last few things as we wrap up tonight, and I want to hear this because this is important. Who are the people, and you don't have to give names, but who are the people in your life that you speak with two questions I want to ask both of you. One, who's in your circle of support? Who are the people, you don't have to necessarily name them, but who are the people that who check in on you, right? Who know. And then secondly, we are all busy. We do things, we all have hectic schedules. How do you deal with self-care, right?
Yeah, I'll answer that. But Pastor Mike, first I just want to reflect. What you just shared, what Raul just shared, I think is so powerful in terms of modeling how to create safe and brave spaces for brothers. Yeah. Because black men do not talk about a 5-year battle of depression.
Yeah.
Black men do not talk about in their childhood struggling with anxiety and describing what we would say now would be cutting or self-harm. Black men don't talk about in a professional period of their life, which should be part of the best part of their life, having a serious and deep depression. And so I just think that we need to acknowledge the vulnerability that you have created, that Dr. Green has created with this space, and that there is power in our stories.
Yeah.
And I hope that for anyone listening tonight, if you are struggling with thoughts of suicide, if you are struggling with depression, if you are struggling with anxiety, that you will get the help that you need. You can call 988. That is a national line that is dedicated to folks struggling with thoughts of self-harm and suicide. But I just wanted to make sure that we said this and provided resources for someone who is holding on by a thread, that there is help for you. And if you reach out to Dr. Green and to the Hope Center team, we will make sure that we get you other resources. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you for that.
Thank you both for being so vulnerable and allowing us to have this space. Taking a step back now. In terms of self-care, we were joking earlier. All of us are members of some of the oldest and largest black male fraternities in the country. And so for me, my line brothers are a huge source of support. So we have a call, and then with 3 of them, weekly, bi-weekly really, we just pray together and catch up. What's going on with the wife, what's going on with the kids. So that's my huge source of my support network is my fraternity brothers and my line brothers. Another way of self-care certainly is therapy. And then, back in the day, I used to get out on that basketball court. This knee don't allow that no more.
About to say no.
This knee don't allow that no more. So I work out in the gym. So that's a huge stress relief for me is just exercise. Another thing that I've learned about self-care is that no is a complete sentence.
Woo. Woo.
No is a complete sentence. And so I think all of us at times, even now, probably struggle with the imposter syndrome. The notion of, because we are often the only black men wherever we are, and we're in these leadership positions, and we feel like we have to say yes to everything. There's a constant, I have to prove myself. And I think it's important to be able to say no and look out for number 1. So that's kind of my self-care strategy.
Well,
So I would quickly say, I'll start where you stopped, Dr. Ankerson. No is my self-care. That I have learned over time in my
I love that.
In my 6th decade of life, time is the only commodity. And so to give you time, people want to meet with me for an hour, I might give them 30 minutes. People say they need me for 30 minutes, it might be 15. But it might be April before I get to you. And it's not because I don't value you.
You don't feel bad, can't feel bad about it.
I value my time. Fraternity life obviously has provided a lot of support, but I can tell you that even at 58 years old, I text my brother or talk to my brother every day. And he's a medical doctor, but it just becomes, sometimes we don't even want an answer, and we're not saying how you doing. It's just a matter of you out there, I'm out there, somebody's out there for you. So I'll stop there and turn it back. But thank you for this courageous conversation.
Yeah, no, I will say that I appreciate you all, right? Because it is critical that we have this conversation. It's critical that you're vulnerable. I love what you say. No is self-care. I would say to those who are watching before we cut to this video that we cannot be ashamed, men in particular, of one, being transparent and vulnerable about where we hurt. Too often we hold that in and we suffer in silence. And when people find out, in some tragic cases, it's too late. And so we have to be willing to talk about where we struggle. And then we have to create communities, support systems of people who will not only check on us, but who we can be honest with, right? And I think that's critical. I have been dealing with some things the past few weeks, and I had one of my friends literally reach out to my assistant to see how I was doing because he hadn't heard from me. So you need those support systems. We need those people in your life. And I think then be intentional about seeking spaces to get the help that you need with no shame, no trepidation. Normalize your health. And as Raul said, you know, there is no health without mental health. And remember that. I want us to check out a video real quick. I have two of our brothers here, Brother Junius and Brother Dorian. And I want you to hear their stories on tonight.
What's up, fam? How you doing? My name is Junius, and as a man first and father second, it's important to have opportunities to discuss mental health because as men, we have a lot of stuff we need to get off of our chest, and we need outlets for that anger, for that emotion, outlets for that love, outlets for those ideas that we have, and just outlets for the energy that runs through our bodies. So it's super important to have an outlet for those spaces and for that energy, because when you hold it all in and you don't process it and you don't deal with it the right way, it can lead to a combustion, it can lead to an explosion, it can lead to a mistake. And while I do firmly believe that mistakes, sometimes they're like the missing puzzle pieces we need in our life in order to create the fuller picture, I do also think we should avoid mistakes when we can. And you do that through having outlets, through making sure that you're informed, and through making sure that you're present in that moment so you can be the best version of you.
Hi, family. I'm Dorian, and yes, as a young Black man, having safe spaces to discuss mental health challenges and concerns is important because, one, sharing feelings and emotions is important for us to understand us and get to know how we feel and why we're feeling it. Understanding how we feel and why we feel these ways allows us to get through situations and not just out of it.
As a dad, I think it's important to lead by example, to give your kids a prototype or at least a roadmap of how they should express their feelings and express their emotions.
My therapist constantly reminds me that I need to be able to get through the situation to actually heal from it and not go around it. So oftentimes we try to get out of it, go around it, skip by it, just to push it off to the side as quickly as possible. But sometimes the road to healing isn't easy and it isn't quick. Sometimes the road to healing does take some time. Through my work at the Teen Care Network, I've learned and I've watched persons who identify as male heal because they have the space or are given the space to heal, talk about their issues, and to discuss the way that they feel and why they're feeling it.
I think the impact of discussing mental health is important for a family. It's important for a father because it also lets your child know that they have the space and the room to express their emotions, to express how they feel. And I think a lot of times when we don't know how to have those outlets to express how we feel, again, it leads to situations.
There's a quote by Dr. Maya Angelou that I love that just says that people will forget what you said. They will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And our feelings and our emotions, the way we feel about ourselves, the way we feel about others, the way we treat others is super important. And in order for us to get to that point of mental wellness as a community and as a people, we need to first, as men and as people of our communities in general, understand our feelings and the power in which our feelings have.
One of my favorite quotes are, "The sun coming up is enough." And knowing that you are enough, right, is okay. Those emotions are natural. Those emotions are a part of life. It's how you deal with those emotions that really make you and really define you. So the sun coming up is enough is my sentence. That is enough to make you understand that it is a blessing to have this life, and then all the emotions attached to it is part of it, right? You're never supposed to know the end of the story before it's there. Like your life is a movie, and you're not supposed to know the ending before the ending comes. So the emotions you go through are part of the story. It's a connection, and the sun coming up is enough. That's really all you have. It's just another day in the sun.
Yeah, I love that because both Junius and Dorian speak about, one, actually dealing with those issues, right? I love Junius's statement, the sun coming up is enough. It goes back to almost, it actually backs up a little bit what you said about week to week. And sometimes, I know for me, it was minute to minute at one point, right? It was being able, because what I tell people here at FCBC, that part of our mental stress comes from two spaces that are not real. One, the past, dead and gone. The future has not been born. And how many of us have faced stress, depression, anxiety about two things that are not real, and we miss this right now moment, right? We miss this moment right now to lean into life, to lean into the fullness of life in this moment. And I think even when it comes to issues around mental health, sometimes we're so fixated on how will I be viewed, or what will I do, or what will people think, or the facade will be broken, or the mask I must take off, that we don't stay in the present moment. And if you are hurting, if you are struggling, what is important in the moment is to seek help, all right? So I have some questions here that we got from some viewers who are watching. I want to pose them to both of you and just get some responses. I'll start with you, Dr. Hankerson. How can parents support their children who have been or seemingly isolated due to the pandemic?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And we know that part of why there's been such a crisis in our youth is because of the school shutdowns during the pandemic. So I think one thing that parents can do is just be present and ask what's going on with their children. I think kids, depending on their age, may often kind of shut their parents out. But I think just trying to understand what is going on with their child is critical. Another thing that parents can do is to become aware of the signs and symptoms of mental health problems. There are many different resources, whether it's youth mental health first aid or mental health first aid, or other types of classes or courses that parents can take, oftentimes for free, that will help and equip them with the ability to recognize when their child is struggling with depression and anxiety or another mental health condition. And then the third thing is, if a parent's child is really struggling, is for that parent to go to therapy. For that parent to go to therapy. Because it is a huge burden and huge stressor for your child to be struggling and you feel helpless about being able to do it. So being able to go to therapy as a parent is, I think, an important step that they can take.
I think we underestimate how those of us who have loved ones who are in crisis, that feeling of helplessness with those you love and you see them going through, it can be staggering in so many ways. Here's another question, Raul, I want you to address. It says, the person said, my brother is experiencing mental health issues and won't go to see anyone. What can I do to support him?
Well, we've talked about 988, which is the crisis intervention helpline. One of the things I would encourage is to, since you're on a desktop or you're on your handheld, go to YouTube and look at our Notice, Talk, Act framework. And Notice, Talk, Act is a non-clinician-based module where we notice when behavior's off the spectrum from this question.
Say that one more time so people can catch it.
Notice, Talk, Act framework. So we know that from the question, they're already noticing that behavior is off the spectrum, that there is struggle. And so what the notice is going to do is now give you bridge words in the talk to how you can bring a loved one out of the shadows or yourself. And then ACT is designed to look at a range of opportunities and options to get some support or some help. And what I say is go to YouTube. The video is about 45 to 60 seconds long. You'll understand the framework better, and it'll tell you how to get in touch with us so that we can direct you to some resources and some supports. But I think Dr. Hankerson makes a great point. You know, the caregiver's burden in health is significant, but it's particularly significant in mental health because we're not acknowledging that we have it. And so we're not taking care of it because we just don't think about it. So let's go to Notice, Talk, Act framework on YouTube. If you don't do any other first step after this courageous conversation is over, go to YouTube, look at Notice Talk Act, and then get in touch with us. It'll be confidential, and we can try to point you in a way that can provide some support.
Yeah, one other question was, where can we go for resources? And here's what I say, this is not to put any pressure on those who are watching, going to make anyone feel bad. You talked about these phones. I have to tell people sometimes here at FCBC, these phones are not just to play Candy Crush, or to look up your next restaurant you're going to. You can actually tap into local resources in the search engine. You can actually go on YouTube and you can type in how to talk to a family member about mental health. I mean, it'll pop up. So I think we have to, if we're intentional about, if we desire resources, then we have to be intentional about how we seek them out. And we have a library, an encyclopedia, access, everything in our phones, on our desktops, on our laptops. And we have to be intentional about that because the resources abound. They don't always get tapped into, right? And so I want to encourage you, no matter where you are watching from today, there are resources in your community. And those resources don't always jump out at you. You have to actually look out for those resources, especially if it's a loved one you see going through something or a way. Now, we already know the crisis hotline, how to go and get in contact, but use the resources literally at your fingertips to help. I also want to have a question. Someone said, how can other houses of worship get involved with mental health movement? Myself and Dr. Green were actually at a conference in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, talking about this. And I think one of the first things you have to do if you're part of a congregation is you can never bypass leadership, right? And I think that many pastors are waiting for actually the push from the congregation. Because if they see it is a need within the congregation, they will begin to address it. Or at least if you come to the leadership with a plan of how we can begin conversations or bring in someone to do mental health first aid or the like, it can begin to start the conversation. But I think what I noticed when we had the conversation in Baton Rouge is that many people were frustrated because leadership wasn't engaging, clergy wasn't engaging. And I think in that way, you have to really seek creative ways to find involvement for the church in that matter. We've done it here because we want to change the narrative. We want to create dialogue. But I think sometimes you just have to talk to leadership in your church to see where they stand with this and if it's something that they want to engage. A lot of times when you approach some leadership, you'll find that they do want to engage it. They just want to make sure it's okay within the congregation and that there's support. And that becomes critical. I'm going to pause here, and I want to say thank you to the both of you. For this tonight. I want to put this in the atmosphere now with Dr. Green and Raul and you, Dr. Hankerson. I want to do part 2 to this. I would love to do part 2 because you can't cover enough in an hour. And I know many people are watching, and this may be igniting something in them, but I think we need to come back and pick up this conversation some more because I don't think we can exhaust this conversation when it comes to black men in particular and mental health. We can't exhaust. And tonight we've just scratched the surface, right, in many ways. And so I think we have to follow this up. But I want to encourage you. We've said it tonight. There are resources in your community. If you're in the local Harlem community, you can check out hopecenterharlem.org, hopecenterharlem.org. And what the Hope Center can't do, they know who can do it. We have an amazing program there with the support of people like Raul Andrews and Sidney Hankerson who've helped bolster that work. We want to be a model in this country for what it looks like when the faith community partners with other organizations and medical professionals to address this issue and these issues around mental health so that we can, again, normalize the conversation. As we prepare to close out, Dr. Green is going to come up and she's going to close us out. But I want Dr. Green to answer a question when she comes back on camera. And the question is this, and I know this is one she can answer, because the question is one that's critical. How can women help support men who are dealing with mental health issues? I think that needs to be addressed. And I know Dr. Green has done it, has been doing it, and can address it. So before Dr. Green closes out, I want her to respond on camera to how can women support men who are dealing with mental health issues.
So to answer that question, the good folks that have joined us on today know that I've been providing services specifically around mental health for men and fathers for a very long time. And so I think for women, it is really just about engaging the men, the fathers, the uncles, the brothers around you in the conversations as it relates to mental health. You can be a champion, you can find your own resources, but continue to be a source of encouragement so folks know that they can count on you and that you can also be a connector. So that's what I would say around that. Okay. So, we want to say thank you to our esteemed panelists for such an amazing conversation. We hope that you were blessed by what you heard tonight, that you got some resources, and that you are not just aware, but that you also know how to act. Our partners make our programming possible. So tonight we want to say thank you to FCBC. We want to say thank you to Mount Sinai. We want to say thank you to the American Psychiatric Association Foundation. We want you to know that you matter, and that we want to be here to support you when you need help. So remember to visit us at hopecenterharlem.org. Again, that website is hopecenterharlem.org, where healing takes center stage. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you for your time. Be blessed, and until next time, good night.